Welcome to the Clean and Filthy Podcast with your host, Matthew M.
Hello and welcome to the Clean and Filthy Podcast, where we are clean and serene with the filthy mind in between. My name is Matthew M. I am your host and I am an addict in recovery. Welcome everybody to episode 40. Welcome back. I missed y'all. We've been gone for the last 6 weeks and I missed y'all. Hopefully y'all missed, me and Groot at least a little bit here. But thank you so much for being here. Happy 2022, everybody. It's a new year. It's going to be a great year. I'm not one of those people who's like, this is going to be my year, but 2022 is going to be my year. So thank you for being here to start off the year right. Hope everybody had a wonderful, blessed, safe holidays. Hope everybody is staying safe from COVID. I literally know like 5 people right now who have it. Shit is scary out there, but hopefully you are safe. And thank you for coming through and checking out episode 40 of the Clean and Filthy Podcast. We have a massively stuffed episode today. It's going to be a long one. I'm telling you right now, it is going to be a long one because we got so much to talk about. And we have our very first interview ever in the history of the Clean and Filthy Podcast. We have somebody joining us in the lab today, sharing his experience, strength, and hope. We're going to get to all that in a second. But before we go any further, we got to give a huge thank you to Valentino Khan, Alice in Wonderland, and Mad Decent Records for allowing us to use the incredible song Anything as the theme music for the Clean and Filthy Podcast. All of the information to download it and stream it is listed in the description below. Definitely check it out. Give that song some love. I love that song so damn much. I've been saying it for 39 episodes. I fucking love that song. So definitely check that out. Also got to give a big what up to our VIP supporters. These are the people on Patreon who are helping support this podcast with donations. All of the donations that we receive from Patreon go directly back into the podcast to help develop this product, make it even better, and, at the end of the day, give back. So hopefully, if you like what you're hearing, maybe you want to throw us a donation. If you think this podcast needs work, maybe throw us a donation and we'll put it right into it. This is where we take care of all of our marketing, buy new equipment, all of the things that really make it difficult to survive and thrive as an independent podcast is help offset by the wonderful and generous donations that we get from everybody on Patreon. So if you're interested in becoming one of our patrons, head over to our Patreon page. You can sign up to be one of our VIP supporters. And not only will you get a shout out on air like these people are about to, but you will also get one of these awesome Clean and Filthy Podcast stickers to display anywhere and everywhere that you like, as well as get a shout out each episode like these people. And the VIP supporters for the Clean and Filthy Podcast are Alex B., Sage A., Cindy, Stephanie, Shar, Liana, Clint, and Alex T. Thank you all for your continued support of this product. It is greatly, greatly appreciated, and I love you all. Also want to make sure to let everybody know if by chance you know of somebody or yourself are a business that would like to support an independent podcast, an up-and-coming recovery podcast, please reach out to me directly. We currently do not have any sponsors for our segments, for our episodes, or for the podcast in general, but we're always looking to find new people to potentially develop business relationships with. So if you know of anybody or yourself would be interested, please reach out to me directly at matthew@cleanandfilthypodcast.com. Just had to throw that in there. Little, shameless business plug there. So I just wanted to say what's up to everybody. Let you guys know what we are. If it is your first time here, welcome. This is the Clean and Filthy Podcast. And again, my name is Matthew, and I am an addict. We are a weekly podcast based off of the 12-step recovery model from the disease of addiction. We are here every week talking about the things that addicts like myself go through on a daily basis just to get one more day clean, one more day away from the disease of addiction. So if you're new here, Just stick around. Maybe you'll hear something you like. And if you do, please make sure to share, share, share. We are listed on every and any podcast directory. We do all of our episodes live on YouTube at 5 p.m. Arizona time, with episodes available for download wherever you consume your podcasts the following day. So if you're on YouTube right now watching the live stream, what up, y'all? Let's get that chat popping. I'm actually going to get to partake in the chat today. I'm pretty excited about that. So if you're there on YouTube right now, thank you for coming through and watching the live stream. And if you are there right now and want to help the podcast out, make sure that you download this episode from any or all podcast directories that you can. That's how we really see that our numbers are going up and that we're able to get this message out to more people. If you are listening right now on a podcast directory, thank you very much for the download, but you want to participate in the live stream, make sure to head over to our YouTube page. All of our media links are in the description below for all the social media accounts, including a new social media account. We'll get to that later. Yes, I'm on TikTok. Yes, I'm on TikTok. We'll discuss that later. But make sure to go to all of our social media accounts, like, subscribe, tweet, retweet, follow, all of those things, so you will know when we go live on YouTube. And then you can participate in the live stream. So again, thank you all for being here. I'm super excited for today's episode. I'm super hype. We got a guest today on the podcast. 2022 means some big new things going to be popping off. So before we get into our first segment, before we get into our recovery and development, we have to do a quick discussion about what we are, what we do, what we don't do, and all of those things. So again, if you are new here and this is your first time, welcome. I really hope you hear something that you like. We are here every single week discussing the steps and traditions and concepts and spiritual principles and all the things that addicts like myself go through on a daily basis, the ways that we find means to become a better human being, to leave the world a better place than we found it. And so if you are an addict who is in recovery, welcome. You're exactly where you should be. If you're an addict who's not in recovery, welcome. You're exactly where you should be. If you're somebody who is not an addict at all, that you're just here because you stumbled across this podcast, welcome. Stick around. Maybe you'll hear something you like. As I always say, the beautiful thing about the 12-step recovery model is it is not about simply removing the drugs. It is about finding ways to become a better human being, how to deal with life on life's terms, and all of the things that are encompassed within that. So if you are here right now, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We know that you have a litany of choices when it comes to podcast entertainment, and we are so very happy that you decided to spend some time here on the Clean and Filthy podcast. So that's what we do. That's who I am. But I also want to make sure to emphasize what we don't do. Because I want to stay in line with the traditions, I will not be speaking from a point of authority or endorsement to any one specific 12-step fellowship. I will not be speaking about what my fellowship of choice is, or what my home group is, or what areas or regions I personally do service in. Nor will I be giving endorsement to any treatment center or recovery residence or sober living or anything like that, because I really do want to make sure to stay in line with the traditions. But if you have any questions at all about those type of things, about what fellowship is best for you, or how to find a sponsor in that fellowship, or help getting into a treatment center or recovery residence or something like that, please reach out to me directly. I love helping people, and being able to help somebody start their journey to recovery gives me immense joy. But again, we won't be discussing it directly on air. If you have those questions, email them to me, Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com, or through any of the social media links. All of them. I'm on all of them now, including TikTok. My handle is @CleanAndFilthyPodcast. I'm on TikTok. Anyway, I digress. So that's what we do. That's who I am. That's what we don't do. And it is time to get into our first segment of the week, entitled Recovery and Development.
Let's head to the lab for some R&D. Recovery and development.
That's right, y'all. We are in the lab lab for some R&D, recovery and development. This is the part of the show where we discuss something out of the 12-step recovery model. We discuss something that relates directly to the life of an addict in recovery. It might be steps, it might be traditions, it might be concepts, it might be spiritual principles, it might be different parts of the reading, or like today, it might be hearing some experience, strength, and hope from a fellow addict in recovery. If this is your first time here on the podcast and you have no knowledge about 12-step recovery at all, just to let you know, the first 1 through 12 episodes, we discuss steps 1 through 12. Episodes 13 through 24, we discuss traditions 1 through 12. And then the rest of those episodes, we discuss the first piece of literature as well as my personal story when it comes to active addiction and now into recovery. So if you're not familiar with what we do here, maybe check that out. Maybe get a better idea of what the 12-step recovery model is, my personal story, any of those things. But today, we officially have our first guest in the lab. I am very excited about this because I was on this dude's podcast as my very first interview I've ever done in my quote unquote podcasting career. And I felt it was only right to have him share his experience, strength, and hope here on the Clean and Filthy podcast. And I'm speaking about Mr. Marc S, the host of the Mr. Stutts Podcast, the stuttering, recovering addict. I am so very grateful that he came through. We have a lot of fun, as you'll see in the interview here. It was a really good time, and I'm eternally grateful for that. So before we get into his interview, I want to make sure to emphasize one specific point. And that is that while I personally do not discuss my fellowship of choice, I personally don't discuss, what fellowship I go to directly. He makes the decision to do so. But he is not speaking from a point of authority or endorsement directly. He's just sharing his personal experience, strength, and hope as to what led him into recovery and the fellowship that led him into recovery. So I just want to make sure to point that out before we get started. And without any further ado, come and hang out with Marc S and myself in the lab. And we are in the lab, very excited. Today, we've got the one and only Mr. Marc S, the host of the Mr. Stutts Podcast, the stuttering, recovering addict, joining us today here in the lab on the Clean and Filthy Podcast. What's up, Marc S?
Yeah, yes, sir, man. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here, bro.
Man, I am excited. For anybody who doesn't know, this man right here blessed me with the opportunity to be on his podcast. And he was the very first interview that I have ever done as the host of the Clean and Filthy Podcast. So I figured our first interview, our first guest in the lab here for recovery and development, it had to be Mr. Marc S. And I am so grateful you're here, my brother. So thank you again. We're going to get into a lot of stuff. I want to talk about what it's like being an addict in recovery. I want to talk about your personal experience, strength, and hope. We got to talk about the podcast element since you're a fellow podcaster in recovery. Got to talk about a bunch of stuff. But first and foremost, I want to give you the opportunity to kind of give your story, share your experience, strength, and hope. Tell us a little bit about, your journey, what led you into the rooms of recovery. When did you kind of know you had a problem? When was your rock bottom, or at least your moment of fuck, I need help, all of those type of things, So
Yeah.
I want to hear from your perspective, my brother. So Mr. Stutts, take it away, baby.
Yes, sir. Well, first of all, man, I just want to say from my perspective, thank you for having me. The first half of the year, I was crushing the whole podcast thing. And then I got married in the summer and moved. And life got wild, so I haven't put out a podcast in a while. And so when you texted me last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, I was like, man, I need to get that vibe back, man.
Life on Life turn shows up, and now you're showing up for your podcast.
That's it, bro. That's it. And I just want to tell your listeners, I love Mike's energy, this guy's energy. I love the energy from this dude. And did I just butcher your name?
You call me Mike, but hey, man, I've been called worse, so you're good.
Bro, my apologies. Right off the bat. I just clicked. I was like,
I can
wait,
be Matthew, I can be Matt, I can be Mike, I can be whatever, bro.
I apologize, bro,
You're
right off the gate. But I love this guy's energy. So enthusiastic. And if you're wondering, is he this enthusiastic in real life, or is it just behind the mic? This guy's text messages are all caps, exclamation marks. This guy is always ready to go.
That's
so
true. He ain't lying. That's true.
You see what you get. You get whatever the expression is. But yeah, man, thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm 32 years old, coming from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I got a pretty laid back story to begin. Like, I grew up in an extremely Christian home. My parents were church leaders and church planters. I grew up, I became a Christian when I was like 4 years old, and I know in the rooms and stuff we don't always talk about specific faiths, but that's just my story. And so like 4 years old, I was growing up in church, and I was always in like a very loving home. My parents, never really had booze around, all very very good childhood, nothing too crazy. Growing up, my dad was a worship pastor, so I began playing music for church very young. But the one thing that I would say to that was, it was a very don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, without any context as to the why.
So, it was rigid. Don't do it, but I gotcha.
Exactly. So like, as a kid, I was always very curious, like, don't do drink, or don't drink, don't do drugs, don't have sex, don't do this, don't watch Harry Potter, don't watch, it was all very, don't do this. And when I asked why, it's like, because it's wrong.
It's like in Harry Potter, don't say his name. Why? Just don't do it.
Just don't do it. So it was all very curious to me. And it's actually funny. I've had the chance to do podcasts before, and to speak to youth groups and stuff and tell my story. But usually when I'm telling my story, it kind of comes to porn. I was exposed to porn pretty young.
Yeah, same.
Age 8 or age 9, and that's really where my addiction kind of kicked off. But in reality, when I was a kid, and I've never told this story before, but it just kind of dawned on me when I was in grade 1, grade 2. My friends and I, we used to cover our hand with permanent marker in class.
Okay.
And just sniff our hands
in
class. Yeah,
Checks
bro.
Out.
And I don't know where those guys are today, but I don't know. I don't know how much that had to play in my future. But
it speaks to the inherent of how us addicts are,
right.
Finding something to change our thought process that maybe we don't even realize until decades later. That's
right.
That's a Clean and Filthy podcast exclusive right there.
That's
there.
Right.
That's right. We got some tea right here.
I love you that much, bro.
I love it, man. I love it.
But yeah, and I mean, to kind of tie in the whole stuttering thing you're talking about with my podcast name and everything, and they call me Mr. Stutts. I stuttered my whole life. I have always stuttered. It's always been a part of my life. Growing up, you kind of learn, tricks and how to kind of get around it and how to kind of cover up for the fact. But it's always been a part of my life. So, very young age, man, freaking kids are ruthless.
Oh
bro.
God. Yeah, bro.
Kids are terrible in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I used to get made fun of and beat up and picked on and put in the hospital and changed schools and that whole thing. And so I kind of had two choices in my mind, I had two choices. I could either become very quiet and reserved and keep to myself and don't get in trouble, don't expose yourself or whatever,
Right.
or just go the opposite I don't care
Just
way.
go, just
And
balls out. Let's
exactly,
go.
balls to
Right.
the wall, just
Right.
send it, right?
Right.
And so
Full
that was
send.
me, and that was me, was the full send side. And so I was always looking for experiences. I was always looking for that rush. I
And-
was always looking to cross the line in some
And that
way.
goes completely against exactly how you were initially raised. And
Right.
that's a very interesting point for me, because mine was very much, my upbringing, while very much different from yours, is so similar in so many ways, where it was don't do that, or do as I say, not as I do. And if you ask
Right.
why, that's just not what you do. So I think it's so interesting that, mine was not from a religious household perspective at all, but we still had such similar stories and such similar experience from completely different perspectives. So that's interesting to me.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And it was interesting because like being raised as a good Christian kid, I very much like there's some kids who just hated church
Right.
and hated God and hated the Bible, and as
Right.
soon as they had the chance to rebel, they went the other way. And the whole truth for me is that wasn't my story. Like, I actually loved the church. I began playing music for the church very young age, and that's kind of my story later on. Was music is a very big part of my story. And so I love the Bible. I thought the Bible was fascinating.
Right.
And so I just always had this pull for the dark side, if you will.
I
I
get
just
that, yeah.
always had that pull. And when I watched porn at age 9 years old, and I experienced that rush, that good feeling, that became something that I ended up chasing for the rest of my life up until recovery.
And
It didn't
I
matter.
vibe with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that you mentioned that, because so often I think for a lot of us, porn really is kind of our gateway drug.
Yeah.
Like I totally understand that rush you're saying, because a lot of people you'll hear in the rooms will say, when that first time I had that first drug, my life changed. For me, that wasn't my story for a substance, but I agree. That first time that I saw something I knew I wasn't supposed to be looking at,
dude.
it was like, whoa. So
And
I love that you mentioned that.
Well, and it's so funny, man, because talking to people, doing the podcast and talking to people in the rooms and different meetings, and like walking through 12 steps with different people, that's a lot of people's story.
It is.
They found magazines in the woods, or like
mine was in the desert, bro.
or like that's so Arizona.
Arizona, yeah.
Find porn in the friggin' desert, but like behind a cactus somewhere or something. But that's so funny. But I mean, that's so many people's story. Like,
Right.
And then as growing up, I worked for a landscaping company when I was a teenager, and the truckers used to have porn stashed in the bathroom. And so like it's so funny how you don't see porn, and then that moment when you do, it just becomes everywhere and it follows you around. And like, I'm 32 years old. I'm not like super old, but I am old enough that where we didn't have cell phones, we weren't able to go on, Pornhub with a click of a finger.
Exactly.
And if we wanted to look at porn on like the internet, it would take like 20 hours.
You'd have to wait for that fucking one picture on 56K.
Yeah, bro.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%. And as it's slowly coming down the screen, you hear your dad coming down the stairs. You're like, you can't click it out. It was a nightmare.
It was all bad. The kids these days, they don't know how good they've got it.
Dude, and that's a whole side note too. Like, could you imagine struggling with pornography and being a teenager?
No.
Like, without guidelines and
age?
boundaries, bro, it's crazy, man.
Yeah,
like
so
I
true.
think about that, quite often, but I digress. So yeah, man. So like, I like from the first time watching porn, and I just I realized that like how I felt in that moment, it wasn't necessarily the like, you know, like the specific or the um specific vice that I was like longing for,
Gotcha.
but just feeling different than I
Mm,
felt right then,
right,
you
right,
know? And that was the biggest thing. So anytime, you know, I started smoking cigarettes very young. I was 13, started smoking cigarettes, and then,
right.
you know, you take your first sip of alcohol and you take your first sip on that, you know, joint, and then, you know, many years later, my first bump of, you know, coke, and then
Right.
your first pill, and all these different things. So it really started at a young age with porn.
And I like that you talk about the progressiveness of this disease, because one of the things that I really vibe with that is, for me, so often it was that excitement of doing the next thing I wasn't supposed
Mm-hmm.
to do. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, yeah, I tried some alcohol. I don't really like the alcohol, but I know
Mm-hmm.
I'm not supposed to be doing it. And then it's okay, I'll smoke some weed. I mean, weed's cool, but it's more that I'm not supposed to be doing it. And that just continued progressing and progressing for my story.
Yeah.
And sounds like yours as well there. Like,
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny with like booze, because like booze is kind of different in the sense that there's a whole bunch of different like types, right?
right,
So
checks out.
it's like okay, so it turns out that, you know, raspberry vodka isn't really my favorite, but there has to be a different type of
There has to be
alcohol that
another
I
one that
like,
I'm
you know what
right.
I mean? And so it was really interesting, man. Like, so I started popping pills to go back to the whole kind of progression
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
story. Is I started popping pills in high school, and like, you know, one of my really good friends, and the whole thing with pills was, it was harder at that time, it was harder to get caught. And if you knew, like, you know, there's no smell,
Right.
you know,
Right.
it does it. So and if you knew what to do, it was pretty easy to get back then.
Checks out. Right.
You know, Oxy and
Yep.
Vikes and all these
Yep.
different, it wasn't very carefully regulated
True.
as far as like pharmacies go and hospitals go. So my buddy and I, one night, we raided his mom's medicine cabinet, and
Checks
we had
out.
no idea what we were taking, bro. And looking back, we're probably lucky that our hearts didn't
Yeah,
stop.
you're lucky to be alive. Yeah.
Dude, to this day, I have no idea what we took.
Right,
It was
right.
just like, yo, this is dope.
Right. Right.
And it got pretty rough. Like it got to a point where my buddy would on purpose get hit by cars
Oh, fuck.
so that he could go back to the hospital and free up.
Wow.
Like it got pretty bad.
Now, question: when
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
getting to that level, did you and your buddy ever have that thought of like, maybe we're addicts, maybe we need some help, or was it just, hey, let's go get hit by a car today? Maybe that Camry will put me back in the hospital.
No, dude, no, not at all. And I
Right.
mean, I think because like I don't know if there was like a stigma or like what the deal was, but like to me, as I look back, addiction was more physical addiction than mental. You didn't really think about, like, especially being raised in kind of this like black and white, like Christianity kind of circle.
Right.
It's you just say no.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yes, right.
And
Yep.
so
Just say
if-
no. That's it. Yeah.
Right. And if you say yes enough, then you'll become physically addicted. And not understanding that at that time, I don't know if we were physically addicted to this stuff, but
Right.
mentally,
Yeah.
there
Emotionally,
was emotionally,
spiritually. Right.
100%,
Right.
man. And so, you know, it would happen every couple weeks, maybe once a week, maybe once every few weeks. It wasn't happening every day, but when we
Right.
had the chance, it was over, bro.
Right.
And so, you know, kind of fast forward to the end of my high school career, I dropped out of school after my parents got divorced. And being a Christian kid in really small town. I grew up about 45 minutes north from Toronto.
Okay.
In this like a small farm town. And that's where I grew up. That's where my shenanigans first started.
Right.
And when you're in that kind of small town vibe, and I know in the US, there's lots of different small towns like this where everyone knows everybody.
Right.
And especially in the church scene,
Right.
every church, everyone knows everybody. And so when my parents got divorced, man, like my dad was a church leader, so was my mom. And it shook the family, man. Like no one saw from the outside, nobody saw this coming.
Right.
And so from my experience, like I lost my virginity very young.
Right.
I was like 13, 14 at the time. I was already experimenting with pills. I was watching porn whenever I could get the chance, but I still wanted to live the right way. I didn't want to let people down. And this is where to me comes the real tragedy, not the real, a real tragedy of addiction is I didn't want to let people down. I didn't want to embarrass my family.
Right.
So I just started keeping secrets, man.
Secrets keep you sick.
Bro, like I wasn't telling anybody about me having sex. I wasn't opening up to anybody. And I had some good people around me in my life. I was telling nobody about that. I was telling nobody about porn. I was telling nobody about popping pills.
Right.
I was telling nobody this stuff. So once my parents got divorced, man, I didn't quite yet go off the rails as far as drugs and alcohol, but I went off the rails and just acting out in different ways. I started sleeping around. I started skipping school. I eventually dropped out. I just started to really not care about anything. And that's really when the chase for feeling good really began to pick up.
And it kind of sounds like, when you're going through all of that element, like a lot of the inner, the inside stuff was so out of whack that it's like, all right, what can we put outside? Whether it's, substances, whether it's people, whether it's actions, let's fill that hole in my soul because there's something going on in there. So I totally get that, man. I totally get that. So now you've dropped out, your parents have kind of split, and now things are starting to kind of progress from the using perspective.
Well, so I began touring, playing music pretty young.
What instrument you play?
So I play bass and background vocals.
All right.
In high school, I was the lead singer for a screamo band.
Okay,
weren't we all at one point in time? And then in my late teens, early 20s, began playing bass for a band that actually went on to do some pretty cool things. But man, one of the biggest things, and this I don't know if this is controversial or not or whatever, but if you are with a girl with bad habits, and you don't have the strength to keep to your boundaries, that booty, it will always win, bro.
That checks out. Yeah.
If we can just be real on the
booty
Clean and
over
Filthy
boundaries.
pod.
Booty defeats boundaries.
Dude. And so when you're, 18 years old, almost 19 years old, drop out of high school, you're already kind of doing whatever you want. And then you start dating a girl. And I had smoked weed a handful of times, and I had gotten drunk quite a bit.
Right.
But this girl smoked weed in her bedroom 24/7. And so that was my next thing.
Gotcha.
So that was age 18. And from then until age 26, 27, I smoked weed every single day.
Right.
And even later on, when like harder drugs came into play and drinking every day came into play, I was stoned 24/7, no matter, wake up in the morning, get stoned. Cigarette break, it's not a cigarette break if I'm not getting stoned at the same time. It's just smoking all the time. So anyway, so to kind of fast track, dating this girl, smoking weed all the time. That just kind of progressed. Her and I didn't last too long, but the habit definitely did.
Right.
And the addiction kind of took off. And so when my band began touring, the band that I was playing bass for, when we began touring, man, it was like we're living in this 12-passenger van.
Okay.
Being from Canada, we got the chance to tour the US. So you feel like extra badass when you cross that border, right? And so for us, man, like for me, I was already living this life where I was keeping a ton of secrets from my family.
Right.
There was a lot of like emotional things that were undealt with because I never really processed my parents getting divorced, which, you know, unfortunately, tons of kids go through this.
True.
But when you're in a really small Christian circle and something like that happens, there's a lot of different elements to it, right?
Right.
And so there were already so many things. The way that I had some terrible like dating relationships that just ended really badly, some toxic people. I was already at 19 years old, I already was just reckless with the way that I just treated girls and treated people.
Right.
And so when you begin touring,
pouring gasoline on that fire.
There's nobody to tell you anything.
Right.
So, you know, you're cracking beers at 9 a.m. and you're doing this. And for me, like, I thought I was invisible, right? Like, I never envisioned any of it because, and I mean, listen, I don't got to tell you, we tell ourselves, you know, I can stop whenever I want.
Whenever I want.
I can,
I don't have a problem. I'm
it
fine.
Won't be like this
fine.
forever.
Mm-hmm.
And the chase really got real the first summer that our band was doing really well.
Okay.
And we played a house party show. And I don't know if like you went to house party concerts back in the day or whatever.
Every so often, yeah, I know the vibe.
It's a wild time.
Right. And I know the vibe.
Me and another musician who was playing for this different band, he came up to me and for a while he's been like, bro, you gotta try blow, man. You gotta try blow. And I just never had the opportunity. I was like, yeah, man, like I will, but it never came up.
That's interesting because that was my exact same cocaine story as well. The first time I did coke was because it was there. I've been wanting to do it. I just didn't know anybody who did it. And then it was there. So I'm like, I guess I'll do it.
100%.
Right.
100%. So he came up to me and like I said, the whole booty thing, bro, like,
right.
He's like, bro, he's like, these two girls want to do blow with us. Like, what do you, like, are you down? And I was like, where do I go?
Right.
Like,
right.
let's go.
Where do I sign up? Right.
So me and my buddy and these two girls were in the bathroom and that was my first hit. And what I found with that drug when I'm smoking weed and I'm drinking and I was doing that, it was almost this like euphoric, like
checks out.
This is what I've been searching for the past
this
20
was
years.
The thing, right?
Yeah, this is what I've been looking for. And from that moment on, bro, all bets were off. Like if I wasn't doing hard drugs, I was drinking all the time, still smoking weed all the time. And so it got bad, bro. And when you're touring and like there's tons of different stories I could tell you about, you know, my bandmates trying to get me to slow down and different, you know, friends of mine trying to, you know, slow down. And so what would happen is I would basically binge on the road.
Okay.
And then I would come home from tour and I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to come home from tour. I'm going to relax,
slow down,
slow down, hang out. But then when you come home, you have friends who haven't seen you in 3 weeks.
So now they want to,
and now they want to party, right?
Okay.
And I'm not turning down a party. So anyway, it got really bad. It got bad to the point, and to kind of, you know, fast track it. It got to the point, man, where not only was I lying to my friends and to my family about my behaviors, but I was also lying to family
Right.
to get money.
Right.
My phone was always cut off. Paying
Right.
rent was a nightmare. I was getting fired from jobs. The only job I could keep was McDonald's, and then
Checks
I would
out.
want, which nothing against McDonald's. The
Right,
Golden
right.
Arches are a good time.
Right.
But and then I would try to get, a different job. And I was also cooking in restaurants, which if you're trying to get better,
Yo,
in the vice
restaurants
world,
are quite a habitat for addicts. I'll say that.
100%. That's not the place to go.
No.
And man, and this is something that, like, you obviously regret it, but when you go through recovery and you go through your step 4, you really realize just how much of a dick you were, right?
Right.
And like, there were girls, man, who like genuinely cared about me, and I was
Right.
basically sweet talking them and treating them right just to get them to lower their wall.
Right.
And as soon as their wall was lowered, I was borrowing $400, $500, $600, $700 and then ghosting them.
Gotcha.
Like just whatever I had to do drugs.
Right.
It was bad. And
Right.
and it was one of those things that I always told them that I would pay them back.
Right.
I always told them, like, that I liked them and I cared about them and I wanted to be with them. And I genuinely did believe that at the time.
Right.
And then
Right.
as soon as I would get what I wanted, I would get high, and then I would get sober. I
Right.
would just feel guilty, feel shameful.
Right.
And what do you do when you're in addiction? You feel guilty, you feel shameful, you cut those people off and you go back out.
And you go and get high again. Right.
And
right.
and that was a terrible, terrible chain for years.
And I mean, but that's what we do. That's what we do. We
Yeah.
find ways and means to get more. And we are master manipulators,
Oh, bro.
especially to ourselves,
Yes.
And I love to go back a second. I really do love that you brought up the element of women, because that's something that, within myself, I've always struggled with. There's
Mhm.
that element of, booty defeats boundaries. Well, for somebody like me, through a lot of
Yeah.
my life, and even early on in my recovery, I didn't have boundaries.
Mhm.
So booty was definitely going to win,
Oh, yeah.
and that is something, I would never say that I used because of that girl, but in the same sense, having that girl there made me even more open to it. You know what I mean? And I mean, in
yeah.
a lot of ways, the female or the whatever gender you're attracted to, attention is a drug. It really is. That ego
course.
fluff is a drug. So I love you mentioned that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, dude, like, we could dive into this right here all night, man. Like,
Yeah.
like, your addiction is a symptom,
Right.
right? It's not the problem. There are things in your heart that you're trying to cover up.
Yep.
There's pain and hurt and emptiness and wounds caused
Yeah.
that you're trying to recover from.
Yeah.
We're basically constant self-medicators, right?
100%.
And
Yeah.
without a proper diagnosis, you often wrongly self-medicate, right?
Yep.
And so, this the way that I treated women or whatever, it was, for me, I was scared of being alone.
Right.
I was scared that people would find out the real me. So if somebody liked me, I held on to that as long as I could. But
Right.
as we do, bro, we self-sabotage.
100%.
That's what we do, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, bro. So it got bad, dude. It got to the point where I was doing coke, like, if not every night of the week, it was pretty darn close.
Right.
I probably slept 2-3 nights a week max.
Checks out. Yep.
Yeah, man.
Yep.
And I was drunk all the time, high all the time, chasing girls all the time, and mistreating girls all the time. I was constantly owing drug dealers and
Mhm.
scared and
That
threatened.
part.
And
That part.
yeah, bro. And it was it was stressful, man.
Oh,
So
I get that.
when you got one drug dealer who's after you, owes you money, or sorry, you owe him money and you don't have it, you borrow drugs from the other drug
guy. Yep. Yeah.
So it was
It's like
just
it's
a
like a
lot.
Ponzi scheme. It's like
Oh,
yeah. It really is like a drug
Yeah,
Ponzi
man.
scheme. Yeah. So was there like a moment within that you could say that was like my rock bottom? Was there, kind of a buildup of like, shit, I need some help? What was that? And then how did that lend into getting into a 12-step recovery fellowship?
Yeah. So when I was 24 years old, the band that I was touring with at the time, and we did some cool things, man. We toured the States quite a bit. We got to go to Japan on tour.
Hell yeah.
A couple albums. Like, it was a good time. And that band broke up right before summer of, I want to say 2014.
Okay.
And that was when my wheels completely fell off.
Gotcha.
I feel like I was barely at that point. I could convince myself that I was holding it together still, because I had this like, dream that I was chasing, and I had this, these albums, and I was touring, and
that
I
was
justification,
rationalization.
Yeah, man. And I was chasing my career and all this stuff. But when that identity was taken away from me, I just partied so hard, and very quickly I became alone in my basement every night doing drugs, and that was it. And so for the next 2 years or so, year and a half, 2 years, that was my rock bottom, but it was a very long rock bottom.
Long rock bottom. I gotcha.
It was very long rock bottom. I began working at a restaurant in Toronto, and me and two friends of mine who I met at this restaurant, we began to basically run the place, and me and my buddy would cook, and this girl would serve and whatever, and we would just party all the time.
Right.
And so, like, living down there, I would constantly go through this cycle of partying and then feeling guilty and wanting to stop and wanting to quit. But that 20-minute walk home in a downtown city, I don't care what city you're in.
What city it is.
If you're walking home for 20 minutes from a downtown core, you're passing
something
2, 3, 10, 20 bars.
Yeah.
And so I would stay strong for the first half a dozen bars, but I'd eventually cave in.
Gotcha.
And one or two beers is all it took for me to be calling up a drug dealer and getting hard drugs.
Right.
And that was kind of the way that it went. And I will add as well that I experimented with a lot of different drugs growing up.
Right.
And Coke was the one that I just couldn't shake.
Right.
Like,
Gotcha.
I didn't really like pills, so I stopped doing them. I didn't really like mushrooms. I stopped doing them. I didn't really like different things. I stopped doing them. And Coke and weed, I just couldn't shake it. So anyway, my brother, after about a year of this, my brother brought me to church.
Okay.
And there was a pastor there playing music who I actually knew from my touring days.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he was like, "Hey, Mark, like, good to see you, whatever." I didn't know it at the time, but I looked like balls. Like, I looked so rough, dude.
Right.
And so he was basically like, "Hey, man, the church needs a bass player. Like, do you still play?" And I said, yes. I hadn't touched my bass since that last tour ended.
Right.
But I was like, oh, man, it would be great to play music. And so I began playing music for this church. Now, the truth is from that point on, from Monday to Thursday, so basically Sunday to Thursday, I would play music, and I would be reading my Bible. I'd be praying again. I got back into the faith. I'd be listening to, worship music and sermons, and I go get back into it. But then Thursday, I would get my paycheck.
There you go.
And I would have one beer and one beer is all it took to go on a full out binge.
And I think that's so
every weekend.
It's interesting how you mentioned that, because it's like it talks about often how we're almost two different people. We're Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And for those 4 days, you were good. You were about your shit. And then all of a sudden, boom, and we're back off and running.
And all the people, especially your family, everyone that you've been lying to, they don't believe that you're really trying. Right. And I was doing everything that I knew to do. And all that was just to pray and read my Bible and try to do the right thing and all this stuff. And I ended up every Thursday, and I never intended on doing drugs. I think maybe subconsciously, but never. I always thought I'm going to have one beer, go home. That's it. And that one beer always led to more. So after about a year of that, of coming back to the church, and this year, so it was a long time of just recklessness. And then for a year, I would be going to church, and Sunday to Thursday, be living a good life. And Friday to Sunday, I'd be binging out. I'd come to church on Sunday morning, awake for 3 days, and, do my thing. And this kind of goes, if you know somebody, people listening, if you know somebody in recovery or who is in active addiction, there's a point of hard truth and hard love, tough love. There's always that point, but make sure that person knows that you love them, because I was showing up to church Sunday morning, high as a kite, reeking like booze. And that church never kicked me out. They always let me play. They just loved on me.
Just like in the rooms, somebody can show up just high as
and not all churches are like that, by the way. I was blessed. I was blessed with this one. But so anyway, after like a year of that, and 26 years of just mayhem, there was a fateful Friday night where I got paid. Sorry, Thursday night. I got paid like $1,600. In one paycheck. I was working my butt off, and I got paid $1,600.
So I mean, you gotta take care of yourself. You got paid. You were working hard. Gotta treat yourself.
That's right. Yeah. And bro, at 4 a.m., I went to go buy a cup of coffee. A double for my Canadian friends listening. 2 cream, 2 sugar. I cut the sugar out nowadays, but back then, a double from Tim Hortons.
There you go.
Absolutely. And my debit card got declined.
Shit.
So I got paid at 7 p.m. And by 4 a.m. I had no money. And we're talking the whole deal, man. We're talking drugs. We're talking booze. We're talking strip club. We're talking lap dances and all this kind of stuff. And that walk home, I was so angry. Now, mind you, I'm still loaded. But I was so angry. I had finally had it, and I started yelling at God. In the middle of the street, bro. I was walking home. If anyone saw me, they probably thought I was I was a crazy person. But I'm screaming out to God, like, how could you let this happen? I'm trying to be a good man. I'm trying my best. And I'm screaming, just swearing, just yelling at God, having a full out meltdown, walking home. And that was not when I got 100% sober. But that was when I began to be honest. That was when I began to tell my family, which they all knew. Like, I'm not,
of course. Yeah, of course.
We're all good at lying at the beginning, but by the end of our addiction, we're terrible.
We can only lie to ourselves.
Oh, bro. Point, And so, yeah, man. And so that was the beginning. And that was 5 years ago. And that was basically the beginning of my recovery journey. And to quickly catch you up to where I am now, 4 years into that journey, I was, getting sober, and then I would have relapse. And then
Gotcha.
I'd be sober for a while and I'd have a relapse. And I met my now beautiful wife. And she's not from this world, man. She's a normie of normies, bro. Like she's not. And, God bless me, man, because she doesn't understand addiction
Right.
as far as experience goes, but the grace that she had for me and the understanding she had for me. And then last fall, I had a really bad relapse that most of the times when I would relapse, it would last a weekend and then it'd be done.
Gotcha. Almost like back with the church days.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And then I'd be done for a few months and then I would have a bad one and then I'd be good for half a year and then have whatever. But this one lasted a couple months.
Gotcha.
And, her and I got into a really big fight over it. I did some things that I shouldn't have done. And I got caught like red-handed and it was really bad. At that time I had already proposed and it was one of those things where it's like, listen, like you're going to lose everything again, like round 2, round 3. And she basically said to me, like, if you don't figure this out, like, and I put her through a lot, man. And she always stood beside me. And I had finally pushed her kind of over that edge, And so, I was thinking, what can I do? How do I get help? And I remembered back when I was 21, I worked at a restaurant with this guy who was washing dishes with me. And he was in AA.
Gotcha.
And him and I were friends.
Right.
And we were pretty close.
Right.
And then a few years after we met, he eventually had to ghost me because I was just a walking trigger for him.
Understandable.
And I was just drunk all the time, high all the time, and he just couldn't be around me anymore.
Right.
So fast forward all these years later, the last time I talked to him was probably 6-7 years ago.
Right.
And I cold called him.
Okay.
And he still had the same number. And I was like, hey, bro, this might be a weird question. And I realized, man, that as I was calling him, what if he's not sober anymore?
Ooh,
like
true,
this could be super awkward.
Right.
So I ended up just being like, hey, man, by any chance, are you still sober and doing AA? And anyway, he was super excited to hear from me.
Right.
And he was kind of scared that I had like died.
Right.
Really.
Understandable. Yeah.
And we ended up doing the steps together. And it was a year of, it's been a 5.5 year journey. And it's been a year of consistent sobriety on November 8th.
Hell yeah, bro.
Yeah,
oh,
bro.
Yeah.
So there's people out there like yourself and who've got some term, but it's been 5 years of this journey, bro. And something just clicked this time, bro. And I'll tell you what really clicked. And I know I've been talking a lot. I mean,
that's why I have you here, my brother.
But I wanted to kind of add this in here. I really like what you're doing, or what you did with the first 39 episodes, I think now that you did, right? Because you went through the 12 steps and the big book and all those things. I believe you did traditions as well, right? Yep. And so people can say that there are many different ways to get sober, and I would never disagree with that.
Right.
For me, the 12 steps were the only thing that worked.
Well, and I think that's it. I love that you mentioned that because, you're talking about that you did a lot of other things.
I tried my best.
Kind of worked. But until you actually got into a 12-step program and did it, like nothing would really work. And that's so similar to my story, because I was the type of addict where I would focus on the stopping, not the fact I couldn't stay stopped. I would focus on, okay, I only have a problem with this drug or with this person. But at the end of the day, the only thing that has ever worked is the 12-step recovery model.
Yes.
And so I appreciate that, that you appreciate that, because a lot of my listeners, especially people who aren't in recovery, are kind of like, we did 24 episodes about steps and traditions. Like, what? But
I know.
it's so important for my journey, for addicts like us. The steps are what work.
Well, and like, you know what, man? Like, I thought for the longest time that I just needed to stop doing drugs.
Right.
As the listeners have heard, a lot of my story is drugs.
Right.
And for a long time, I did not think booze was the problem.
Right.
It was, some nights I would have 12 beers, or some nights I just have one and watch the hockey game and call it a day.
Right.
But in the last few years, every time I had beer or had booze, whatever the booze, whether it was a day, a week, or whatever, eventually it would go into a full-blown relapse.
Right. Right. And that's what it is. At the end of the day, no matter what the substance is, once we put it in our bodies, we might be able to handle it at first for a day or for a couple or for even longer than that. I have a couple friends that aren't in recovery anymore, and their life looks like it's okay right now. But what's it going to look like in 6 months? What's it going to look like in a year? And that's a scary thing, man. That's a scary thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what does your recovery kind of journey look like right now? What would you say your recovery process is at this moment?
Yeah, so I mean, I did the 12 steps last year. And by the way, I think everybody on this earth should do the 12 steps, bro.
I've been saying that since I got into recovery, bro.
Yeah, man. I don't think you have to be in recovery to do the 12 steps.
True.
There's so much soul searching and so much self-reflection and so much self-awareness that this world is lacking, that the 12 steps just open you up, bro. And so that's a side note. But yeah, man, I did the 12 steps last year. I started going to meetings over Zoom, talking about the whole, I only went to my first in-person meeting a few months ago.
Right.
In Canada, they just started meeting in person in the end of the summer. So I just went to my first in person, but going to meetings over Zoom, and it was cool because like I actually started with some older gentlemen. I started a sobriety call.
Okay.
So it was like not necessarily like alcohol or drugs, but just overall sobriety. So you had people who was porn, you had people that was booze, that was drugs. Lucky for me, I got all of the vices
all of them
in once, right?
So
some people got a little bit of this or that. I had it all. So, lucky me. So I had sobriety call, which was really cool, which I actually do still Saturday mornings.
Very cool.
Which is cool because it's Saturday morning, 8 a.m.
Right.
The only chance I'd be up at 8 a.m. back in the day was if I was still awake.
Oh, 1,000%.
Right. I'm not up at 7. You know what I mean?
1,000%.
So to be able to get up and to have my coffee and have a wife, like, bro, there's friends of mine that I'm right with them. I don't understand how I'm married. I don't understand how any of this happened. You know what I mean?
I get it. Yeah.
I'm just trying to do the next right thing, And so I go to big book study meetings and sobriety meetings, and I actually am sponsoring a couple people right now. And like, how it goes, bro. Some people you sponsor and they end up choosing either a different direction or they go back out.
Right.
And some people stick with it or whatever. But it's been a year. Like I said, it was a year, November 8th, and something just clicked this time, man. When you realize, and the whole reason why step one is you need to realize that like, this has nothing to do with you except for obedience.
Checks
out.
It. Checks out.
Right? like surrender is the only thing that you have to do.
You have to do, right?
Because you were doing it your way all this time and it never worked.
Right.
You know,
right.
and so yeah, I kind of lost where I was going with that, but that's where I'm at right
man.
now.
And I gotta give you a shout out as well, man, because I will say I can't imagine getting into recovery in the middle of a global pandemic. You know, like I've got a couple buddies that the same kind of story. You know, they started their whole recovery on Zoom and just were able to go to in-person meetings. So I mean, that in itself is a testament that recovery works if we work it. It doesn't matter what life circumstances pop up. It doesn't matter what's going on on life's terms. But if we really work recovery works. You know, so I mean, you deserve a lot of credit for that, man. That's a big thing, man. That's a big thing.
I appreciate that, bro. Thank you.
So what would you say, like, if there was something that, you know, that you've kind of gathered over this last year that you could tell that person who was first going off the rails when those wheels fell off? What was something that, you know, really jumps out at you that you say, if I would have done this, my life would have been a lot easier?
Oh man, I mean, there's two different kind of ways to go with that. Like, on the one, there's a part of me that believes that my life went the way it was supposed to.
I agree with that. I do agree with that.
And,
right.
And so on the one hand, like, dude, there's tons of things. Like, do I have things that I wish I didn't do and people that I wish I didn't hurt?
Right.
Of course.
Right.
But as far as like there's so many things that happened that if they didn't happen,
wouldn't have led you to this point. Right.
Right.
Okay.
And
then what
if
about
my life, even if my life was perfect, I might have never met my
never
wife.
made it here. Okay.
So who knows?
Right.
But I definitely understand where you're going.
All right. Then what about if you change it to a newcomer instead of to you? What about what would you say to a newcomer? There you go. Okay.
Honesty, 100%. And don't get me wrong, I knew where you were going, but I just want to clarify in my own story.
Right.
And there's so many people out there, but yeah, dude, just being honest, like honest with, as funny as this sounds, like honest with yourself is such like undervalued, right? I don't think people really understand how easy it is to lie to yourself.
Yes.
And there's like the word humility comes up, which I think is kind of easier said than done. And you get the benefit of recovery to kind of whatever, but just being honest, I think, the people who love you will actually be able to help you if you're honest.
And I love that you mentioned that because two different things. One thing I totally agree with, you know, there are things in my past that were horrible, but I wouldn't change them because every one of those things led to where we're sitting right now on December 14th. You know what I mean? So I agree with that, but I also love that you mentioned honesty, man, because that was something that's always been difficult for me, especially even in recovery. I could be honest to others, but I couldn't be honest to myself. I was struggle with that so much where I would be living an honest program to others, but I'd be lying to myself. I would be lying to myself. I love that you mentioned that. So I want to transition from that kind of into the podcast element. You know, so what made you want to get into a recovery podcast journey? Because, you know, it's something that we talked about on your podcast. There's a lot of us out there. And I didn't even realize, like, what was the catalyst for you that was like, I'm going to start a podcast and it's going to be about recovery?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I love to talk. If you and your listeners haven't haven't noticed, I love to chit chat. But it's actually funny. Like when the pandemic first started, I like luckily I've been working most of this time. I'm super blessed in that regard.
Right.
But for the first month and a half, I wasn't working like most of us.
Right.
And so like a lot of bored people out there.
Right.
I started a podcast.
Checks out, same.
Whatever, right? And so I started a podcast in April of 2020, and it was over YouTube.
Okay.
And it was just YouTube. I didn't know about the different platform opportunities.
Right.
I didn't realize how easy it is to actually distribute your podcast
True.
and to all that stuff. Like the program and website that I use now, like it's super simple. Like
Right.
you can literally record a conversation with your mom and post it on
Right.
Spotify in
Right.
10 minutes. Like it's nuts.
Right.
Which is really cool, but I didn't realize any of that. So I did YouTube.
Right.
Now I stuttered a lot looking
Right.
at the camera, and I found myself editing it a lot to cut out the stuttering, or I would record in like 10-minute segments.
Okay.
And then if I stuttered, I would cut out that segment and re-record it.
Right.
And it was just, I was really self-conscious about my speech. And after 3 or 4 episodes, I just decided that this isn't for me.
Okay.
Fast forward to my last relapse, and starting the 12-step program, getting into meetings, and I just really had on my heart to do a podcast still.
Right.
But the way that I did it, a year prior wasn't
what it was going to be. Right.
It wasn't going to work for me. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do a podcast. What will I talk about?
Right.
I'm a sports addict now.
Right. Same.
I've always loved sports. I love music. I could talk about, faith and Christianity and all that stuff. But at the time, recovery was everything, man.
Right.
I was going to meetings, and I was, going to meetings all the time. And I was, talking sobriety all the time. I was reading the big book or reading different books by different recovering addicts. Like
right.
that was just consuming my mind.
Right.
And so I decided that, I would really like to get into podcasting, and down the road, I would love to get into some radio opportunities and stuff like that down the road. And there's a lot of people like us, bro.
Yeah.
And
we carry hope. We carry hope with us,
and
man.
like the one thing that you just mentioned, and that we mentioned when you were on my show, is that there's thousands of recovery podcasts.
Yeah.
Which at the one hand, it's like, okay, well, in any other genre, you would want to, or any other topic, you would want to do something that not everyone's doing.
Right.
You would want to talk about something different, do something different, whatever it is. My hope is not to make it as a recovery podcaster.
Okay.
If this takes off, and if like your podcast explodes, if my podcast explodes, great.
Right.
But I've always been somebody who wants to make it.
Gotcha.
And I want to be famous, or
Gotcha.
I want to, like with music, that's what it was, bro.
Right.
It was chasing fame, and
right.
chasing girls and chasing status. And for the first time, I was like, I actually genuinely can truthfully look you in the eyes and say, I want to help people.
Yes. I just got goosebumps, bro. That's the
man.
shit. Yep.
And you know what, bro? Listen, if I make some money off this, then that's cool. Like, I'm not going to complain. You know what I mean?
No.
And if this podcast springboards me into, a radio, so like whatever.
Right. But you're
whatever
helping
happens.
people.
But that's really what I want to do, man. And to highlight these stories, I think the biggest thing for me was I really felt alone.
Right.
When I first tried getting sober, I cut everybody that I partied with out.
Right.
And then everybody that I was friends with, my new friends, were all great people. I'm still friends with a lot of those people,
right.
But they were all from a totally different world than me.
Right.
And I had
gotcha.
nobody close to me who was sober, who had been through what I've been through. I had no addicts around me at all in
Right.
recovery or not.
Or not. Right.
And
right.
so, and I didn't know about, and I mean, at that time too, man, recovery podcasts weren't what they are now. They were very, very few.
Checks out.
You know, there was maybe like Dopey and Sober Guy,
Right.
and,
Right.
you know, Church and Other Drugs.
Right.
But there wasn't that many of us out there at the time. And so I felt really alone. And so like, if I could just comfort somebody out there who feels that way, that's all I'm looking for. And like I said to you, man, after getting married, life just got hectic and I kind of put the podcast on the back burner. But being able to talk to you now, and I'm excited for what 2022 is going to bring, bro.
Hell yeah, brother. I'm glad. I'm glad we were able to help each other out here. You know, that's what us addicts in recovery do, right?
That's
you know?
it.
We
That's
carry
it.
each other. We help each other. So another question regarding the podcast, like how would you say podcasting has kind of changed or shaped or impacted your recovery?
Good question. I mean, especially in the early months, you know, I got a little bit of pushback because it's like, Mark, like, yeah, you've been trying to get sober for 5 years, but at that time I'd only been sober for like whatever, November to March. So
Gotcha.
whatever that
so
is,
5-6 months ish.
Yeah, not even,
yeah,
right?
Not even,
so
right,
like
right.
3-4 months. So at that, you know, I had some pushback. Some people like, you've only had 3-4 months of sobriety together.
Right.
You know, who are you to be kind of, and I was saying those things to myself too. Like,
checks out.
Who
right.
am I? Who am I?
Self-sabotage,
Yeah, man.
right.
And that's what led me to, like, I kind of did the reverse of what you did,
right.
Where now I'm starting to record more solo podcasts and whatever, but I wanted to highlight people's stories because recovery was still something that I was processing, and I was in the middle of the 12 steps at the time,
right?
You know, and like I've already said, like, I had been trying to get sober for 5 years, but it was really only sticking then. So instead of trying to speak out of experience that I might not have really had yet, I wanted to highlight other people's stories. And so to go back to your question, what really it helped me in recovery, especially in those early months, was consistency. You know, like I it was weird, man. Like, we talk about surrender and we talk about step one, like the old Mark would have relapsed and kept doing the podcast and pretend that never happened.
Right. I got you.
And the new Mark wasn't going to let the old Mark win.
Right.
You know, and even like we're talking about like sober, you know, routines and what my recovery looks like. Like, bro, I wake up early and I make a pot of coffee and I read, and I wake up 2 hours before I go to work.
I gotcha.
Which is wild.
Like, me and active addiction ain't doing that,
bro. And to the point where my wife needs to tell me to relax, because if I sleep in, I am pissed.
Gotcha.
Like, because that's an old Mark move.
It feels like old tendencies. Right.
I'm not getting back to that. So anyway, that's what the podcast probably helped me with regards to recovery.
And
I
love that, man.
Consistency.
And it shows what I do like is that because there are so many different, you know, recovery podcasts out there, we have the ability to come at it from different perspectives. You know, you came at it, like you said, from getting other people's story in there because you were developing your experience, strength, and hope at that point. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because you know, no matter what the listener is out there wanting to hear, there's that option. You listen to a podcast with somebody with 50 years clean. You could listen to a podcast with somebody who's just starting off. And regardless, all of us are out there in different ways, shapes, and forms, and that's what I love so much about recovery is the fact that you and I can sit here having a conversation, and we aren't from the same country. We go to different fellowships. We have different experiences. We have different drugs that we love to use. But at the end of the day, we're both the same. We're both addicts in recovery, and this works.
And you know what, man? Sorry to cut you off.
No, go.
Like I just wanted to throw in that the cool thing about hearing people's stories too is that I would talk to people like yourself who've had a few years. I would talk to other people who my very first episode was an interview with a old tour buddy of mine where his band was from Long Island, New York. And so whenever our bands would meet up, him and I would just burn the towns to the ground.
Go hard, right?
And out of all of the people that different bands toured with, us two were the least likely to get sober, right? And we actually got sober around the same time.
That's so cool. Yeah.
And so, but then, I'm talking to people who've been sober for over a decade.
Right.
Or I'm talking to people who've always been sober, but their dad passed away from drug addiction.
Right.
Or even like not podcasting, but like going to the rooms. There was a guy who got COVID. He was like 70 something years old, survived, by the way, still crushing it.
Right.
And he was in a AA Zoom meeting from the hospital room.
I love it.
70 something years old, sober for 50 years.
And still in that meeting.
Still going to the meetings.
Yep.
And that just showed me that like, this is your world.
Yeah.
Like there's no making it like, this is anyway. That was something interesting.
It's always a constant thing.
Sir.
And our medicine is meetings, is step work, is being of service. That's how we stay all right.
Yes, sir.
I love that. All right, I've got one more question for you before we close up here.
Let's go.
This is a serious question here. Okay, so after the crushing Game 7 loss last year, how good are the Maple Leafs going to end up this year? They are currently second in the division. Will they make the Stanley Cup?
Oh, bro. Okay, listen. You set me off here now. Okay, so listen to me. So you're from Arizona, right? Yeah. So our star centerman, Austin Matthews, he's from Arizona, right?
Right.
And all we keep hearing is if the Leafs don't do well, all he wants to do is go play for his home state and all this stuff, right? So this is the thing. The Toronto Raptors basketball, we won a championship 2 years ago. Okay. And when we won that championship, we had been making it to the playoffs for like 6, 7, 8 years in a row. We were always one of the best teams in the regular season.
Right.
We were always winning 50 plus games. We were always incredible.
Right.
And in the playoffs, LeBron would come to town. Our balls would go back up inside of us and we would just fall off the face of the earth. And so that season when they traded for Kawhi and we won, and you basketball fans, whether you know Toronto or not, you remember that season.
Yep, 100%.
That season was a championship or bust.
True.
Like championship or shut down the stadium, never come back to play basketball again. Like we've had enough, right?
And you pretty much knew Kawhi was leaving after that season regardless. So it was like, get that championship. Yeah.
We were all, this whole city, we were all addicts, bro.
Right.
We were all lying to ourselves, telling ourselves stories of how he might come back and loves Toronto, and that's all a load of crap.
Yeah,
we all know that
he's
now.
friends with Drake. They're gonna get up there in an apartment together. Right?
Exactly. Bro, like every time this guy was in Toronto, there'd be like helicopters following them around. Like it was ridiculous. So anyway, as far as the Toronto Maple Leafs go, The last time the Toronto Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup, my father was 5 years old. All right.
Yeah.
They have been doing this to us forever.
Right.
And we're almost, and the reason why I brought up the whole Raptors thing is the Toronto Maple Leafs are almost at that Raptors place.
Okay.
Where the regular season, well, we are there that the regular season doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
It doesn't.
Because you know you're going to be good. You know you're going to make the playoffs.
Dude, I think we've lost. I think we're a third of the way done the season almost. And I think we've lost like 5 games.
Yeah, you're doing well.
Like
right.
we always do well. Our big guys always get their points.
Right.
They always score. Like we're fine.
Right.
I could care less about the regular season. I think they're playing right now.
I think, yeah, it's either tonight or tomorrow. They got to get. I saw it when I was researching this. Yeah.
I could care less. I mean, I'll watch.
Right.
But I could care less. I got in this debate with my friends the other day where they say that the Leafs need to win 1 round in the playoffs.
Okay.
I'm saying at least 2 rounds, bro. Will they win the Stanley Cup? I don't think so.
Will they make it to the Stanley Cup?
Oh, as of right now, they should.
Okay.
But I mean, oh man, we're all of us fans up here. We're so self-deprecating. Like, oh, right. Bro, I don't even want to say it. But you know what? I'll call it. I can't even bring myself to do it. I'm trying to.
There was that pause.
Oh man, I'm trying to call it, but I don't know. They're gonna do really well this year, and I think that they have the team that they can do it.
Okay,
but they got some demons, bro.
Yeah,
they got
out.
some. They blew a 3-1 lead to one of the worst teams in the league last year, and I don't know. They got some demons to shake, but they got a good team, and if not, the Blue Jays start up after the playoffs.
And you guys got Vladdy Guerrero Jr. and he is a beast,
dude. This
Vladdy
is a
Guerrero
fun team to watch, man.
His dad was my favorite baseball player in baseball, and when he came up, I was just hoping he was going to be good. That's all. I was just like, he's never going to be as good as his dad, but I hope he's good. He might be better than his dad,
bro. Well, and there was so much hype for him up here in Toronto, man.
I can imagine.
And his first season, he was not good.
Yeah.
And they the last 2 years, bro, he's come to play, and I'm excited to see it go. But you better be careful, bro. I could talk sports friggin' all night.
We might have to have a sports episode of this or something. You know?
I will say though, I am pissed at your Phoenix Suns because I may have put a parlay bet on them last night, and they did not.
They did not show.
They did not do well. Well, and the Clippers were favored, and I thought that was stupid.
Right.
But Vegas knows best, bro.
Yeah,
what can you say?
There's a reason why Vegas has all those pretty lights and I don't.
That's right.
Awesome, my brother. Well, thank you so much for coming and hanging out here in the lab on the Clean and Filthy podcast.
Yes, sir.
Tell all of my listeners and my viewers, where can they find more Mr. Stutts content?
All right. Thank you, man. Thank you again, Matt.
Yes, sir.
Thank you again for having me, man. So you can find me on Spotify, Apple Music, as well as I'm pretty sure anywhere that you get podcast, Breaker Audio, Google Podcast. I think Pocket Cast, wherever you find podcasts, but Spotify and the Apple mainly. Mr. Stutts, the stuttering recovering addict who can't stop talking. That is my show. Like I was saying to my buddy Maddie here, I took off since the summer, just getting married and moving, changing towns and kind of getting my new life settled in. But I'll be starting up some podcasts coming up again in the new year. I have a couple episodes recorded, ready to go. That I'll be releasing in the next few weeks. So you can find me there. I'm on Instagram at Mr. Stutts Pod. You can send me an email at MrStuttsPod at gmail.com. send me an email, send me a chat, whatever. I'm always down to talk. And I have to, before I leave, I do need to ask you a question.
Okay,
I'm gonna
okay. Turning the
flip this.
tables on
That's
it,
right.
huh?
I'm gonna
Okay.
flip this.
Okay.
Have you listened to your very first podcast?
I have
Like,
not in
since-
about 42 weeks.
Okay, so I listened to my very first podcast.
Right.
No, I don't know if it was like a few weeks, a couple months ago, whatever. Not the best promotion, but holy cow, man. Like
Yeah.
when you listen to your last episode, like your latest episode
Right.
and your first episode, whew,
I'll admit I'm a little scared. I'm a little scared to go back and listen to it.
just let it stay in the past. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I'm
Just
kinda-
let it stay there.
Maybe like when we get to like episode 100 or 1,000,
Yeah,
maybe then
yeah.
I'll go back and listen
But
to
man,
it.
like I was texting you today, man. I was
Yep.
telling you, I was listening to your latest episode and the things that you do and the like time for clean and filthy and all that stuff,
Right.
bro. I gotta step my game up. But,
Hey man, let's
but yeah,
talk.
that's where you can find me.
Perfect, man. Well, yo, seriously, thank you so much for coming through. You know, like you said, you ain't gonna put up any episodes at this current moment, so everybody's got a chance to go back and get caught up on all your previous episodes.
That's right.
There's
Yes,
some
sir.
amazing
Please
stories
do.
on there. Some amazing stories. There's a moderately funny host of this other podcast called the Clean and Filthy Podcast. He's got an episode on there, so maybe check that out.
That's
But
right.
all of the description, all of your information will be in the description below. So the
Beautiful.
link to all of your contact info and all that will be down below. So again, thank you so much for hanging out here on the Clean and Filthy Podcast. Really appreciate it, Mr. Stutts, Marc S from Canada. Thank you, sir, and we will see you all on the next episode.
The pleasure's all mine, man. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We are back out the lab. Huge thank you to Marc S, host of the Mr. Stutts Podcast, for coming through, sharing his experience, strength, and hope, having a good time. We had a great time during that episode. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the interview. We're going to be bringing in a lot more people here into the lab to share their experience, strength, and hope. So again, huge shout out to Mr. Stutts for coming through the Clean and Filthy Podcast. All of his information is down below in the description, how you can head over to his podcast, hear all of his previous episodes, maybe even the episode that features yours truly on there. Plus, he's going to have new content coming out in 2022. So check him out. Show him some love from the Clean and Filthy Podcast family. So that's what we got in the lab. Time to clean up our pipettes. Time to take our lab coats off and get ready for the second segment of the show entitled My Favorite Moment of the Week. And while it is not officially sponsored by Bang yet, your boy officially did a wardrobe change. I feel like Lady Gaga right now because we did a wardrobe change. For those who aren't on the live stream right now, you don't see, but I have a shirt that says sponsored by Bang. And while I am not officially sponsored by Bang, this is manifestation right here, right? We are manifesting that this part of the show is sponsored by Bang Energy with delicious 300 milligrams of caffeine, EAA aminos, ultra CoQ10, and super creatine in a whole assortment of delicious flavors. Get you a Bang. We are manifesting the Bang sponsorship. Shout out to my boy Yehuda, major friend of the podcast, for making me this shirt for my birthday and starting the manifestation process to get this segment sponsored by Bang. I digress. So what do we do in this segment? This is called My Favorite Moment of the Week, and this is where we just discuss things that have happened over the last week that make me happy. I'm a happy, optimistic person, and I like happy shit. So we might talk about news or sports or music or cars or movies or social media or TikToks, because now I'm on TikTok. Yes, I'm on TikTok. I know. I'm on TikTok. Anybody who's a loyal listener to this podcast knows my relationship with TikTok. But it had to be done. Follow me on TikTok at Clean and Filthy Podcast. just saying. So this is not focused on recovery. We might talk about some recovery stuff in here, but mainly we're just talking about fun shit that I like. So if you have anything on any of the social medias that you might think might make me laugh, send it over. As I said, we're on all social media now. Or send me the link, Matthew at CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com, and maybe we'll talk about it here on the show. Again, not directly recovery related, but we just like to talk about fun stuff here. Before we get into the wrap-up of the last 6 weeks, we have to do 2 rest in peace shout-outs. First one is to John Madden, Hall of Fame NFL coach and literally NFL royalty, passed away at 85 years old. And while he never played in the NFL because of an injury, he got a knee injury before I think it was during his rookie season. He never played it down in the NFL. He has become one of the most well-known names in the history of the National Football League. He coached the Raiders for 10 seasons. He was the youngest head coach at the time. Back in the day, they weren't hiring the Cliff Kingsbury or the Sean McVays in their 30s. You had to be like a grizzled, damn near AARP member to become a head coach in the NFL. And what do you know? He started the trend in a way. He ended up coaching for 10 seasons for the Oakland Raiders at the time, was the youngest coach to ever reach 100 wins, and he did it in 10 seasons. He has the second highest winning percentage in the history of football. He still has the most wins in Raiders history. He won Super Bowl 11. He never had a losing record, y'all. Like, in today's sports, to never have a losing record, every team, the best teams ever, the dynasty teams, have an off year. And he never did. Plus, everybody knows him for his sports casting. Like, his voice was synonymous with NFL for so many years. He ended up winning 16 sports Emmys for his NFL coverage. And if you didn't know him for that, chances are you know who he is just because of his Madden NFL game. Like, everybody, you don't have to be a gamer and you know about Madden. Everybody knows about Madden. Like, any gamer, any human being knows about Madden. That the game itself has generated billions of dollars in revenue. It leads to yearly competitions between gamers and also yearly complaints by NFL stars claiming that their Madden stats are too low. It's a funny thing. Like, the day that Madden stats are released, you'll have just a stream of tweets of people super not happy with their score. It's a funny part of NFL tradition at this point. So shout out to him. Rest in peace, John Madden. Also, have to give a huge rest in peace to actor/comedian Betty White. Died at 99 years old. Absolute Hollywood legend. Over 70 years active in TV, movies, and radio. She has 124 different acting credits. Literally 549 entries on her IMDb page. It's nuts. 5 Emmys and a Grammy, plus 7 books. She was a major advocate for racial equality, for LGBTQ plus issues. Shout out to her. She passed literally 2 weeks shy of her 100th birthday. It was kind of funny. There's a lot of memes that came out about her comedic timing, that she passed right after the People magazine episode or issue on her 100th birthday came out. So that was kind of funny. But shout out to her. We got to do the thing that we do every week is my weekly fitness update. So we got to do that. I'm very happy to report. Well, I'm not as happy as I thought I was going to be. I really was trying to break 200 pounds before the start of 2022. I fell a little bit short. As of this morning, I am 206 pounds. I had gotten even lower than that, but then I ate like shit. Shrug emoji. But I'm pretty happy with where I'm at. I'm still doing my core and cardio. We're going to get abs one day, y'all. Like, we're on this journey together, and one day, someday, somewhere, somehow, I'm going to have abs. Maybe I'll never have, like, a full, like, 12-pack looking like Mr. Antonio Bryant running shirtless off of the field at the Bucks game, but I'm going to have some abs. I actually, fun note, I take a picture of myself at the beginning of each year, and my Snap memory came up of my butt ass naked itself at 225 pounds. And I was pretty happy with how I looked comparatively. And sometimes when we're in it and we see ourselves every day, we don't see the improvements, but I was pretty happy about that. Just to wrap up, the holidays, beautiful celebration with my son for Christmas. I had another birthday, so I'm another year older. It was just a really good time. His Monster Truck collection is continuing to grow. And I say his, but I really mean our, because low-key, I kind of enjoy playing with him as much as he does. I digress. We got to do a quick football update. We're going to do things quick here because that interview went for a while, so I don't want this episode to go super-duper long. But we got to talk about some NFL. Because when we last spoke on the Clean and Filthy podcast, both the Cardinals and Ravens were in first place in their division. And now the Cardinals are in second place in their division, but they have clinched a playoff spot, and they could still win the division if they win Week 18 and the Rams lose. All right, cool. Looked pretty good against the Cowboys. Cool. But the Ravens, y'all, the Ravens have lost 5 straight games after getting more injuries. They already had more injuries than anybody in the league. But after more injuries, losing Marlon Humphreys, losing Lamar Jackson, both to illness and ankle injuries, they're now third in the division, third out of fourth in division. And as of right now, have a 2% chance to make the playoffs. What does 2% look like, you ask? So, for them to make the playoffs, Baltimore needs to beat Pittsburgh in Week 18. Plus, the Chargers must lose to the Raiders. Plus, Miami must lose to the Patriots. Plus, the Colts must lose to Jacksonville. And while 2 of those things are rather likely, or at least possible, but the fact that we need the clusterfuck of a dumpster fire that is the Jacksonville Jaguars to beat a pretty solid Indianapolis Colts team, yeah, it's so unlikely. I really should put a bet on it. I should put a parlay bet on all that because, I could put $1 and probably win 500. It's so unlikely. But, injuries, COVID, and I feel a little better because even a couple Steelers fans I know, one of them was like, yeah, injuries, man. He even acknowledged how bad the injuries were. So still have hope. Still have hope for Week 18, but it's gonna be difficult. Got to talk about for a second my fantasy results. Really don't have much to talk about because seriously it was trash, so no reason to really discuss it. I got 12th place in one league and 9th place in my other league. Shout out to my boy Jeremy out there, though. He did big things in his leagues. Wish I could be like him in fantasy. I digress. Staying with the sports tip, though, we got to talk about the Suns for a second because even with the COVID issues that have been occurring, not just for the Suns, but the NBA and all sports and the world in general, dropped a couple games, but they've been looking really good. Team basketball had a franchise record 18-game win streak. Currently are 28-8, second best team in the league, second in the Western Conference, behind the Warriors. I hate the Warriors so damn much. They're going to be a problem. They're already a problem. They don't even have Clay or Andrew Wiggins unless he came back over the last couple days. They're going to be a problem. They're really going to be a problem. But go Suns. Let's make it to the finals. All we got to do is make it through the Warriors, and I think we'd be all right. I digress. Got to talk about a movie real quick. And I don't know how I really feel about the movie. I know it was a really good movie, but it made me really sad. And that is the movie Don't Look Up. It's the most recent Adam McKay film on Netflix, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, Jonah Hill, Meryl Streep, Cate Blanchett, and Tyler Perry. It was incredibly well directed, well written, amazingly acted, well filmed, but it was even more depressing. It was even more depressing because of the reality of it. So I can't really say I liked it, but it was very well done, and I think you should watch it. My 2 cents. Me pretending to be Roger Ebert right here. I think you should watch it. I can't give it a rating out of 5 because I didn't really like it, but it was really well done, if that makes sense. We're going to talk about another movie, though. We got to go into some Marvel. You guys have missed the Marvel content, right? You have to have missed the Marvel content because, I mean, I haven't been here for 6 weeks. And a lot's happened in the Marvel worlds in those last 6 weeks. So we got to talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. The manly Marvel men had another outing. We went to see Spider-Man No Way Home. And I don't want to give spoilers to it just because of COVID. You know, people have been in lockdown. Some people haven't been able to see it, so I'm not going to spoil it. But holy shit, it was everything I was hoping for. Like, legit, everything I was hoping for. I'm so incredibly happy with it. Like, I screamed yes at the screen so many times. My boy Alex sitting next to me was straight up embarrassed. Especially when a certain lawyer from New York showed up. Woo! Woo!
That part.
It was fucking fire. There were so many incredible Easter eggs, so many nods to potential characters coming out. The fact that it made the What If show on Disney Plus like required MCU viewing, it was amazing. I laughed. I cried multiple times. I cheered. It was literally everything I could ask for from an MCU film. And plus, it felt like a spectacle. It felt like the MCU style spectacle that we haven't had since Infinity War and then Endgame. You know, I loved Black Widow. I love Shang-Chi. But like, it wasn't a spectacle. You know, this was built up over so many years. It was very well done. My only complaint about No Way Home was that we didn't get more Hannibal Buress. I love Hannibal Buress. I loved his character. But he didn't get much in this movie, which was a little unfortunate. Other than that, I loved it. Plus, I fucking love Tom Holland and Zendaya being together. I love that. I love their character. I love their chemistry. I love that they're together in real life. Like, I hope they stay together forever, not just for the sake of the MCU, but just because they're both so damn cute together. Like, low-key, forever. I just want them to be just part of the MCU for decades. For decades, Tom Holland, always Spider-Man. Period. Point blank, period. All right. Fanboy rant about Spider-Man is done. But we got a little more Marvel because we have to talk about Hawkeye, y'all. If you have not been watching the MCU shows on Disney Plus, why not? You really should, because Hawkeye was absolutely amazing. Like, obviously, it didn't have the same level of expectation as No Way Home. Obviously, like, you know, there wasn't as much going into it with that. But as excited as you know, I was for it, I loved it even more. Like, I was excited about this show going in, but I loved it even more. It is the best Disney Plus show, period, hands down.
That part.
Not even close, not up for debate. Don't at me. It's number one to this point.
That part.
Period. Point blank, period. I'm just going to list a few of my favorite elements about it. Getting to learn more about the Ronin backstory that was introduced in Endgame. Oh, that was everything to me because I love the Ronin character. Haley Stanfield as Kate Bishop, she was perfect for that role. The tracksuit mafia, bro, was so well done, bro. LARPing, the Rogers musical, the constant dissing of Hawkeye and his self-deprecation. The fact that it played out over 6 days before Christmas and each episode was a day, I loved that. The dialogue between Kate Bishop and Yelena Belova, I loved that. The introduction of Echo, I loved that. The Mockingbird Easter egg, I loved that. The fact that we had a show between two very attractive human beings and never once was there this sexual desire or sexual tension that so often Hollywood just like falls back on. They're like, rather than actually developing these characters, let's just have them want to fuck. That's just like the go-to so often. And the fact that there was never that it was strictly like a mentor teacher type of role was so wonderful. And the long take in the car chase was amazing. Plus, the ending The very end of the last episode of episode 6, where they go into what Kate's name is going to be. So well done. So well done. And that means that the fact that the Young Avengers has to be a thing, I love it. But what do I love the most? Kingpin. 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 Fucking Kingpin. I love Vincent D'Onofrio. He is absolutely spectacular as Kingpin. And the fact, fun little fact here, that it was his decision, his suggestion to have Kingpin wearing the Hawaiian shirt as a nod to the old Spider-Man comic. I love that so much. I haven't bought a comic book in years, but I am going to buy the Hawkeye series that this was sourced from, period. Thank you for coming to my Marvel TED Talk. No questions. Seriously, I was so blown away by the show. Shout out to Jeremy Renner. Shout out to Haley Stanfield. Shout out to Florence Pugh. Shout out to Vincent D'Onofrio. Like, it was so well done. If every show like that, if every Marvel show on Disney Plus is like that, I want them to continue for forever. For absolutely forever. Because it was so well done. I'm so happy about it. Only thing that sucks is that we don't have any new Marvel until May. May of 2022. We have no new Marvel. So my plan is to rewatch all of the previous Spider-Man films, to watch everything again from Phase 4, which means the movies and the Disney Plus shows, to get ready for the next movie, which is Doctor Strange. Multiverse of Madness, which is, it's going to be so good. It's going to be so good. So that's what we got in my favorite moments of the week. Little wrap up of the last, 6 weeks, if you will. So that's what we have. Come back next week where we're going to be talking about more things that just make me happy, that I like. And maybe by then this shirt will be 100% truthful and we will be absolutely and actually sponsored by Bang. But until then, we are unofficially sponsored by them, so I'm going to drink some Bang. You should, too. And now it is time for our third segment of the week.
It's time to Ask an Addict with your host, Matthew M.
That's right, y'all. This is our third segment of the week entitled Ask an Addict. This is the part of the show where we talk about whatever questions are submitted to me. I like answering questions, so send your questions over to me. They do not need to be recovery related. They easily can be. I'm perfectly happy if they are. But we just like talking about just fun stuff. So I like answering questions. If you have any questions that you would like to have potentially answered on air, send them over to me. Again, on any social media platform. Or easiest thing as well is just send me an email. Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com. We will add them to the script and we will answer them. Again, they do not have to be recovery related. So our first question, I was actually asked this question twice, so I figure this is a perfect place to answer it. It says, you talk about the Ravens and the Cardinals a lot on this podcast, but if they were to play in the Super Bowl, who are you cheering for? All right, so I was born and raised in Arizona. And most of my childhood, the Cardinals were shit. Like, they were just trash. Most of my childhood. So most of my childhood, I wasn't as much of a Cardinals fan as much as I was a fan of individual players. Like, I remember I had a Marcus Allen jersey. I went as Marcus Allen for Halloween one year. I had his Raiders jersey and a Raiders helmet. Like, I had a Barry Sanders jersey. I had a Chad Johnson jersey. I liked players more than I liked individual teams, as for the most part. But the Ravens changed all that. They were the first team I actually supported through and through. And that's all because of Ray Lewis. Like, Ray Lewis is my favorite player in history. Definitely my favorite defensive player in history. And having, I loved him in college. I've always loved Miami, University of Miami for some reason. I don't know why. I've just always been a fan of Miami Hurricanes. And so when he came to the Ravens, it was like, okay, all right, I'm here for this. But even through, I've still always repped for the Cardinals, you know, even through the devastation, even through the ridiculously shit shows of seasons that there were plenty of. You know, the devastation, one of my biggest painful moments of sports is when the Cardinals lost in Super Bowl 43, which, side note, continually intensifies my hatred of the Steelers. But I've always repped for them. So I would say if it were to come down to them being in the Super Bowl, I would be wearing like a custom jersey that's like split down the middle, half Ravens, half Cardinals, really trying to stay middle of the road. But honestly, internally, I'd be hoping that the Ravens won. I'd be hoping that the Ravens won at the end of the day. They were the first team I truly supported. And because of that, I feel a tie to them that just hasn't ever gone away. So that's who I would really go for. The only way that I would be openly cheering for the Cardinals to win is if Larry Fitzgerald was playing for the Cardinals, because he deserves a fucking ring. Like, one of my absolute favorite players, probably my favorite offensive player of all time, stand-up dude, just a legit dude. I've met him a couple times. He's just a fucking legit dude. He deserves a ring. So no matter, I'm saying right now, let's start a petition that no matter when the Cardinals make the Super Bowl, whether it's this year or in 30 years from now, they should sign Larry Fitzgerald, put him in some pads, have him go out there for one play, and get him a ring. That's what I'm saying. I don't care if they got to fucking wheel his ass out there in a wheelchair. He has to go out on a walker. Just have him line up back there, take a hike, drop to a knee, so he gets to play and potentially end up with a ring. That's what needs to happen as far as I'm concerned. We'll see if it happens. So answer the question. I'd be cheering for the Ravens. Just saying. All right, next question I got was, were the holidays difficult from a recovery perspective? And this is always an interesting question. It's always an interesting thing because for a lot of addicts in recovery, the holidays really are a stressful time. The holidays are a difficult time for a lot of us, you know, whether it's because of old habits, whether it's because of, you know, being around situations that are difficult. You know, the holidays are always a stressful time for a lot of us. And I'll say, you know, it's a lot different than what it used to be for me. You know, when back in the day, the first Christmas that I was back in recovery, the first Christmas after I, you know, went to treatment and all that, was less than a year after I had broken into my parents' house to look for dope money. You know, going into the bathroom that I used to use in and seeing the little reminders of that was a lot more difficult, and it gets a lot easier over time to deal with. You know, this year, the most difficult thing, honestly, was the schedule. You know, I had my son for like 5 days in a row. Then I had his Christmas with the family. Then we had my birthday with him. And then we had my birthday with the family. And then we had Christmas because my birthday's on the 24th of December. So it was definitely a lot. But I'm very grateful that I get to experience it. You know, I'm very grateful that I get to show up and have it be a lot. And it's interesting because like when we all went out for a family dinner, the first thing they did was order alcohol. First thing they did was order wine. And they asked me for my recommendation on wine. And my response is like, I'm not going to be drinking it. Why the fuck are you asking me? Like, I literally then said to the person who asked me that, I said, I didn't ask you what kind of cocaine I should do. So why are you asking me what kind of drink or what kind of alcohol you guys should order? And then at, you know, Christmas dinner, it was, what bottle of wine are we going to open? And what wine? And this wine's so good. And like, it wasn't triggering at all for me, partly because I don't give a shit about, about alcohol. That never was really my go-to. Maybe if they would have busted out some old school OC 80s and started railing in those at the table, maybe it would have been a little more difficult. But it thankfully wasn't. And, you know, I had somebody in recovery around at all times, so it never even entered my mind of like, oh, God, a drink would be nice. Or, oh, you know, I'd like to use. It would make this situation better. And that's just the joy of recovery, is the further we get away from our last use, the easier things truly get. So For me, thankfully, the holidays really weren't stressful. They weren't difficult from a recovery perspective, and that's just a testament to the program working. So that's what we got for that question. And the final question says, who was your first follow on TikTok? Yes, I'm officially on TikTok. I held out as long as I could. I'll be honest with you. I really did. But as of now, at Clean and Filthy Podcast is a thing. So everybody who's on TikTok should go follow me, and you should send me those fire TikToks because I'm officially on TikTok. And content on TikTok will be getting posted probably tonight. But my first follow on TikTok was at Yehuda.music because I told him he was going to be my first follow, and he was. And he's really one of the biggest reasons why I'm on TikTok because he just peer pressured me for so long about getting on TikTok that finally I crumbled. So shout out to him. After I followed him, I did the standard, followed Daniel Mack, Angry Reactions, Cobby Lame, the very basic standard TikTok pages. So yeah, I'm on TikTok. I know. I get it. I talked so much shit for so many months about TikTok, and now I'm there. So go follow me on TikTok. Let's make some fire TikToks together, y'all. But honestly, there's a really good recovery community on TikTok, and it really is it's a fun new avenue. And lowest key, as much as I hate to admit it, it's kind of fun, and I've kind of been enjoying it for the 24 hours that I've been on TikTok. So I didn't say that. And if anybody tries to quote me on that, I will just deny it very intensely. I'm just saying. I digress. So that's what we got for our questions today of Ask an Addict. If you have any questions that you would like to have this addict, the resident addict on the Clean and Filthy podcast, answer, please send them over. I would absolutely love to answer them. Again, on any social media, including TikTok, or directly to Matthew at CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com. All right, y'all. Well, this has been a very long, difficult some mess issues in there episode, and I thank you everybody for sticking around. But we can't close up without those clean time shout outs. This is the part of the show where we celebrate various members who have achieved continuous recovery milestones. We shout out all of the universally accepted milestones, which are anybody as a newcomer who has 29 days or less, anybody with 30 days clean, 60 days clean, 90 days clean, 6 months clean, 9 months clean, 1 whole year clean, 18 months clean, or multiple years clean. We also like to give shout outs for any large whole number. So if you got 100 days, 1,000 days, 10,000 days, anything like that, send them over to me, and I will put you on here to give you a shout out on air. Anybody celebrating any time between now and next week, send it over to me, and we will get you in the next episode. We give them books for each year, so don't be alarmed. And realize we got a whole bunch of Clean Time shout outs today. We got a whole bunch. I missed last week, so we added them to this week. So reload, strap in, let's go. We got 3 newcomers this week. First and foremost, the most important people at any meeting. From Twitter, we've got Patty as a newcomer. Well done. Also as a newcomer, we've got Clay. Well done. And also from Twitter, as a newcomer, we've got Sarah. Well done. The next up with 90 days clean, we've got Kayvon. Hell yeah, brother. Then with 90 days clean, we got a really good name here. We got Matt. Hell yeah, good name, bruh. Then with 9 months clean, we've got Rob L. Hell yeah. Then with 1 year clean, we've got Lisa M. Then with 2 years clean, we've got Claire. Then with 2 years clean, we've got Robin R. Then with 3 years clean, we've got Steve S. Next from Twitter with 3 years clean, we've got Hannah G. Next up, we got my sponsee brother with 4 years clean. We got Nate T. Next up with 4 years clean, we've got Nikki. Reload. Next up with 5 years clean out in Vegas, we got Ryan S. Then with 7 years clean, we've got Lola C. Well done. Next, we're going to Twitter for a fellow recovery podcast host celebrating 9 years clean. We've got Pop B. Well done. Next up, we get into some double digits with 10 years clean. We've got Jen M. Next from Twitter with 14 years clean, we've got Michael M. Whew, and now I'm really going to need some help. Because with 23 years clean, we've got Eric. Just finish it off there, y'all. Give me one more, designer. There we go. All right. Next up from Twitter with 9,000 days, which is like 24-ish years, we've got Dan St. J. And then next up with 29 years clean, we've got Marc S. And then finally, with 30 years clean, 30 years, 3 decades from Twitter, we've got Wayne G. All right. Well, congratulations, each and every one of you who celebrated your clean time today. If you didn't celebrate clean time today, just don't use and you will. That's literally how this process works. And remember that every day clean is a successful day.
That part.
Yeah.
That part, that part, that part, that part.
Well, y'all, thank you very much for being here. We are officially done with episode 40. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I apologize for the couple hiccups that we had along the way, but hopefully you enjoyed the episode. Hopefully you heard something that you like, and hopefully you come back next week as we share more experience, strength, and hope and recovery from the disease of addiction here on the Clean and Filthy podcast. Again, huge thank you to each and every one of you for being here. Thank you for downloading, for sharing, for following, liking, tweeting, retweeting, all of those things. Huge thank you again to our VIP supporters. Again, thank you so much to Valentino Khan, Alice in Wonderland, and Mad Decent Records for the amazing anything that's playing in my ears right now. Please make sure to download this podcast wherever you consume your podcast from. Make sure to check out all of our social media. Send me those fire TikToks, and I will see all of you next week. I love each and every one of you. Thank you for being here. See you next week.
I just wanna feel anything.